Richard Morrison had built empires. At 62, the silver-haired businessman had traveled the world countless times, always moving forward, always focused on the next meeting, the next deal. That Tuesday morning at JFK Airport, he was doing what he'd done 1,000 times before, rushing toward Gate 47 for his flight to London. But sometimes, life has other plans. Richard was a tall man, still fit despite his years, with kind blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, which, admittedly, hadn't happened much lately. His tailored navy suit was crisp, his leather briefcase worn soft from decades of use. He'd learned long ago that expensive things age beautifully when they're made with care. He was 40 feet from his gate when he heard it. "Please, please help me!" The voice was small, desperate, cutting through the airport noise like a bell. Richard turned to see a little girl running toward him, tears streaming down her brown cheeks. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, with beautiful dark curls bouncing as she ran, wearing a red dress and white tights. Her little red shoes slapped against the polished floor. "Please, mister," she cried, reaching for his hand. "My mommy won't wake up." The briefcase dropped from Richard's hand. The flight to London disappeared from his mind. In that moment, nothing existed except this frightened child and her plea for help. "Show me," he said gently, kneeling down to her level. "Show me where your mommy is, sweetheart." The little girl grabbed his hand with both of hers, pulling him back through the terminal. Her name was Maya, he would learn later. Right now, she was just a terrified child who needed someone to care. They found her mother slumped in a chair near Gate 39, her head tilted back at an unnatural angle. The woman was young, maybe 35, with the same beautiful curls as her daughter. Her name was Diana Foster, a single mother traveling home to Ohio after visiting family in New York. Richard's heart clenched. He'd seen this before, years ago, when his own mother had collapsed. He knew what to do. "Call 911, he told a flight attendant firmly, already checking Diana's pulse. It was there, weak, but there. Now, please. Then he turned to Maya, who was sobbing quietly, her small body trembling. Richard sat down next to Diana and pulled the little girl into his lap. "Your mommy is going to be okay," he said softly, stroking her hair the way he used to comfort his own daughter, Emily, decades ago. "She's just very sick right now, and we're going to get her help. Can you be brave for her?" Maya nodded, burying her face in his suit jacket. He didn't care that her tears were soaking through the expensive fabric. Some things matter more than appearances. The paramedics arrived within 6 minutes. 6 minutes during which Richard held this child he'd never met, whispering reassurances, telling her about his own daughter, about how doctors are very smart and know how to help people feel better. As they loaded Diana onto a stretcher, Maya started crying again. "I want to go with Mommy." "You will," Richard promised. "I'll make sure you do." And he did. He rode in the ambulance with them, holding Maya's hand while the paramedics worked on Diana. At the hospital, while Diana was rushed to emergency care, Richard sat in the waiting room with Maya, showing her pictures on his phone, buying her apple juice from the vending machine, helping her color in a donated coloring book with broken crayons. He called his assistant in London. "Reschedule everything," he said simply. Something important came up. 3 hours passed before a doctor emerged. "Are you family?" she asked. Richard looked down at Maya, who had fallen asleep against his shoulder, her small hand clutching his tie. "I'm here for them." The doctor smiled, understanding. "She's going to be fine. Severe diabetic episode. She's conscious now, asking for her daughter." Relief washed over Richard like a wave. Thank God. When Diana saw him carrying her sleeping daughter into the recovery room, tears filled her eyes. "You stayed," she whispered hoarsely. "Of course I stayed," Richard said, gently transferring Maya to her mother's bedside. The little girl stirred, saw her mother, and burst into fresh tears, happy ones this time. Over the next hour, as Diana regained her strength, Richard learned their story. Diana had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes just a year ago, was still learning to manage it. She was traveling alone with Maya because she couldn't afford to bring anyone else. She worked 2 jobs, as a hospital receptionist during the day and doing data entry at night, trying to give her daughter a good life after her husband had left them. "I forgot to eat this morning," Diana admitted, embarrassed. "We were running late, and I just forgot." "It was stupid." "It was human," Richard corrected gently. "We all forget things when we're stressed." Before he left that evening, Richard did something he hadn't planned. He wrote down his personal phone number and gave it to Diana. "If you ever need anything," he said simply, "anything at all." Diana tried to thank him, but words seemed inadequate. Maya, however, wrapped her arms around his leg and said, "You're my angel, Mr. Richard." Richard felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been closed for a very long time. He flew to London the next day. But the meetings felt different now. The deals seemed smaller. He found himself thinking about a little girl in a red dress and her brave mother struggling to build a life. When he returned to New York a week later, he called Diana. They met for coffee, with Maya, of course, who brought him a drawing she'd made of an airplane and an angel. Over cups of coffee and apple juice, Richard learned more about their lives, their dreams, their challenges. And slowly, something unexpected began to happen. Richard, who had spent decades building companies, started building something more valuable, a relationship, not romantic, just human, a friendship born from a moment of crisis, sustained by genuine care. He helped Diana find a better diabetes management program, connected her with resources she didn't know existed, offered to cover Maya's preschool tuition, an offer Diana initially refused until Richard asked her, "Would you deny someone the gift of giving?" Sometimes receiving is the greater act of courage. Years from now, when people ask Richard Morrison about his greatest accomplishment, he won't talk about the companies he built or the deals he closed. He'll talk about a Tuesday morning when he missed a flight and how that missed connection led him to the most important connection of all. He'll talk about Maya, who calls him Uncle Richard now, and Diana, who became one of his dearest friends. He'll talk about how sometimes the most important meetings aren't on our calendar. They're written in moments we never saw coming. Because Richard learned something that day in the airport. Success isn't measured by where you're going. It's measured by who you stop for along the way. And sometimes, the smallest voice calling for help leads you to the biggest purpose of your life. The little girl in the red dress taught a billionaire what real wealth looks like, and Richard Morrison, for the first time in decades, felt truly abundantly rich. Sometimes we're so busy reaching our destination that we forget the detours are where life actually happens.